and I turned on the radio, and it was your voice. And you were quoting Romans 11, "Oh, the depths of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments, how unfathomable his ways."
I've seldom talked about this publicly, but it got so heated that one night I'm in bed with Cynthia, and I sit up in the bed and I say, "I'm going to quit next Sunday."
They came into my office the day after my mother's funeral, and they said, "You know, you've been getting a lot of sympathy from the people because of your mother, but now that she's dead, we're going to get rid of her."
F.B. Meyer wrote, "No man suddenly becomes base. No tree suddenly rots and falls. No church suddenly splits. No marriage suddenly ends in divorce. It's all got a history." Well, I want to thank you for joining us today as we have a conversation with one another. I'm sitting at the table with Dr. Robert Jeffress, the pastor of the historic First Baptist Church of Dallas. And welcome, Robert.
Chuck, it's great to be with you. I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Yeah, we've all heard that voice on various phases of television and different settings, and so it's great to sit here and visit with each other. Our relationship goes back to Wichita Falls, but we'll get to that in a moment.
Yeah.
I want to begin by talking about what's closest to our hearts, and that's those people in our inner circle, our family members. Your wife, Amy.
Yes.
Of how many years?
It'd be 48 in a couple of weeks.
Great.
We actually met in the 7th grade and became best friends. She was seated in front of me at Ms. Denny's math class, first period, and she would turn around and ask for help in her math problems.
Yeah, I'll bet it's help.
And it was all the ruse. It was just all, and I fell for it though, and got hooked, and we've been together ever since.
Oh, that's great. I was afraid you were going to say, she turned around and I said, "Would you marry me?" But it wasn't quite that quick.
I wanted to say it, but I didn't that.
Mine was that quick, but it wasn't in any class. Anyway, tell us about your family.
Well, I'm married to Amy, and we have 2 daughters. Julia is our oldest daughter, and she has triplets, and it's an amazing story how that came about. But she and her husband, Ryan, are ministers in our church. And then my youngest daughter, Dorothy, works in real estate here in Dallas.
Great. So they're both local.
They're both local. We get to see them a lot, which is great.
I always like asking people who have had triplets, and what did you say after you woke up from your faint, after hearing someone say there are 3 babies in there, not just one?
You know, it's an interesting story, Chuck, because it really testifies to my children's faith, which I credit their mother for. I mean, but Julia and her husband had gone through 3 miscarriages, and they decided that they felt led by God to pray for something big. They prayed that God would give them triplets, one life to replace every life that was lost.
Oh, my. I never heard that story.
And when they told me that, I said, "Don't pray that way." I said, "You're just setting yourself up for disappointment. We don't have a history of multiples in our family."
Oh, you have great faith.
I know, that's what I said, me of great faith. And my daughter said, "Dad, if you want to see God do big things, you've got to pray big things."
Oh, wow.
And God gave them triplets.
I'm going to write that down.
Well, she wrote a best-selling book on the topic. It's called Pray Big Things.
Oh, my.
And it was a great testimony to the power of God.
So what's the age of the children?
They're 7 now.
Oh,
they are
okay.
and old enough. They're on their way to Vacation Bible School this morning. They were texting me on the way to church. So
That's great.
I couldn't imagine that. But they're a great joy.
How has grandparenting been of help to you in ministering to other people, perhaps other families, as well as your congregation?
I think it's softened me up a bit. I really do.
That's a great answer.
And I think the congregation has enjoyed seeing Amy and me as grandparents. When I walk into the church, when the orchestra starts and I walk in, my grandson Blake, he always runs across and gives me the biggest hug. The congregation loves seeing that.
Isn't that great?
Just the other day, I went by the Vacation Bible School room where the 8-year-old girls were, and my little granddaughter Blair was in there, and all of the kids started rushing toward me. He's our pastor. He's our pastor. And another one said, no, he's the president. And my granddaughter ran toward me and hugged me and said, he's my pawpaw. And
isn't that great?
Those are just great moments.
I remember the time I was entertaining the idea of visiting with all the seniors that were graduating on a particular year at our church. So I invited them to come in one at a time and had time with them to talk about the future. It was a real milestone they had reached, and now they were going to be on their way to college or the military or maybe some realm of business or whatever. And one young lady was really hesitant, and she just stopped at the door and looked in there. And I said, hi. She goes, hi. And I could tell she was scared to come in there. I said, please, come on in. And so she came in and stood. There was a chair there for her. I said, have a seat. I'll just stand here, and I'll be gone soon. I said, no. I want to talk with you. Are you afraid? She said, oh, Pastor Swindoll, I am so afraid. I said, what are you afraid of? She said, oh, God lives in here. Sort of like the president. I said, he lives everywhere. Yeah. And if he puts up with me, he'll find great favor in you. And we had turned around to have a great visit together. But there is that sense of awe or aura that comes over us, and we don't want that to be there, but it's there, and we have to break that down. I love to hear you say it softened me.
Yeah.
That's the shepherding part of your role, isn't it?
It's an important part of the role.
I believe it.
I mean, preaching's unspoken essential. I mean, obviously, that's a minimum requirement, but a pastor has to be a lot more than a preacher.
Yes, that's so true. So true. Well, First Baptist Church of Dallas, man, that's terrific. And I congratulated you back then, and I do now after what, 17?
17 years. We're getting ready to have our 18th anniversary in a couple of weeks. And as many people know, it's the church I grew up in. And I was called to ministry when I was 15. And it's interesting how God prepares you for things. I thought, Chuck, when I was from the ages of 6 to 15, I thought I knew what I was going to do with my life. I was going to be a television producer. That's what I was absolutely set on doing. I was fascinated with not what happened in front of the camera, but the business behind it and how it was put together. My parents would drop me off at the Dallas Library when I was 10 years old to work on my homework, but I'd drop my homework and go to the periodicals and pull down every magazine I could on broadcasting or on business. I was reading Forbes magazine when I was, in grade school. I was just absolutely fascinated.
They must have thought you were a rich little kid in that library.
And I wasn't. But I went to a youth camp, our church's youth camp, when I was 15. And it was after the noon service. Everybody was racing toward the cafeteria to get in line first. And God spoke to me. He said very clearly, you are going to be a pastor. People asked me, was it an audible voice? I said, no, it was louder than that. It really was. And I remember going home that afternoon. I first of all told my one-day wife, Amy, she was with me at the time. I told her what God had said to me. I went to my parents. They both said the same thing individually. They said, Robert, we knew this was God's plan for you from the day you were born, but we never said anything about it to you because we wanted to be sure it was God calling you.
Your immediate family, you have brothers and sisters?
I have a brother and a sister, and my parents are in heaven. They went very early in life. But I went and told them, and then I went to tell my pastor, Dr. Criswell, who had been the pastor there for 50 years, and I told him about what God said to me. He said, Robert, it's the beginning of the summer. I want you to spend the summer working in every area of the church, the missions department, the children's department, the music. He said, I want you to learn every square inch of this place because one day it will all be yours. And he knelt down with me and prayed for me that God would prepare me.
He said, one day it will be yours.
Yeah. Now, in fairness, people say, well, he said that to a lot of people. I said, yeah, but with me, it happened to come true.
Yeah, okay, great. That's great.
He gave me the preparation and the encouragement to study in the ministry. And of course, I ended up being the youth pastor there. He hired me when I was 21 to be the youth pastor. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I would not have hired me to do it, but he did. And then I went away for 22 years to pastor 2 other churches, and then I came back 18 years ago as pastor.
Well, when a mutual friend of ours contacted me about preaching at the church where he was attending, I said to Bill, sure, I'd love to do that. Let's find the right time. Who's the pastor there? And he mentioned you, and he loved you dearly and said, I just think it would be great to have the 2 of you meet as well as you're being with the congregation. So I came and was at your church, Wichita Falls.
The old First Baptist, Wichita Falls. And Chuck, I'll never forget the conversation we had driving from the church to the restaurant to eat.
Yes.
You were in flux then. You had left the church in Fullerton.
Yes.
And you were at Dallas Seminary as president, and you wanted to start a church, and you were thinking about Nashville,
maybe.
I
was, seriously.
And then you were thinking about maybe Dallas and so forth, and you asked me for my input. And I said, Chuck, as long as it's not Wichita Falls, go wherever you want to go.
You know, that was an interesting part of my finding a place, because I never, ever wanted to be at a place that would be like the great monsters stores that pop up, and the little mom and pop stores don't have a chance to.
Yes.
And not that I was any of that, but when I would go somewhere, I would be known sometime, and I wanted to be careful that I wasn't crowding another ministry. And someone mentioned, in my case, coming out here to Frisco, and I'd only hunted dove out here, so I didn't know anything about what had developed here, and anyway, it led to that. But I remember being with you and thinking, this isn't your last stop in the process of your ministry, because I could tell you were at home doing what you were doing there, and you feel at home where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I felt like when I was in Eastland, Texas, my first church is county seat town out in West Texas, or Wichita Falls, both great churches, but I was missionary. I was a missionary, I felt like.
Wow.
But when I came back to Dallas, it was like coming home. You know, Chuck, I remember one time, you don't remember this, but I got to know you much earlier, back in 1982. When I was youth minister at First Dallas, we brought our church youth choir out to Fullerton.
I do remember that. And, I do remember you came to the Fullerton church.
Yeah,
yep.
And I was seated on the platform. It was a Sunday night. Our choir sang, and you were preaching through Hebrews, and the place was packed. And I had never seen this before. You had a printed outline of your sermon, and I thought that was so unique. And I took it back to Dr. Criswell, and I said, Pastor, you wouldn't believe that people get these outlines out, and they fill them in. And
they do.
I tried to get him to do it. He never would do it. But it was
Criswell didn't need anything like that, you know.
It was a great help.
Well, I've got to ask you this now that I have broken ground with you on how you became a part of the ministry there. It's something to follow a person that has had a long-term ministry at a church. And, I mean, we're talking 50 years. We're talking W.A. Criswell, you know, in the eyes of some, one of the powerhouses in the history of the church. And here you are stepping in those shoes.
Well, you know, our church is interesting. In a 100-year period of time, it had only 2 pastors. Now, think about it. 2 pastors in 100 years.
It's remarkable.
George Truett for 50 years, and then Dr. Criswell for 50 years. The good side of that was it poured a biblical foundation that you could never shake the church away from, having those two people as your pastor. Of course, it was a hard act to follow, and the church, after Dr. Criswell, went through 3 pastors in 17 years.
I'm familiar with that.
And all of them were strong preachers.
Yeah, I was friends with each one of them.
You were, and they're great, and they're all 3 friends of mine. And but it was just almost an impossible situation. So I felt blessed to come to the church when I did. The congregation was ready finally, I think, to do what it needed to do to turn the church around.
So you don't feel intimidated stepping into that place, or you didn't back then, 17 years ago?
I had no doubt I was where God wanted me to be.
You were coming home.
I was coming home. Yeah. It's interesting, when the pulpit committee, they worked for a year.
Yes.
They started with 200 people and narrowed it down to me, and they called me to ask me if I would come preach in view of a call. It was the night before I left on a Journeys of Paul trip to Greece with my current church.
Sure.
And so I said, well, I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks. Let me pray about it. Chuck, I knew I was supposed to go, but I was afraid to go in one sense because I knew the challenge it was going to be. Yes. We had a great ministry.
And you knew the other 3 men had been there.
I knew. And I didn't feel like I matched up with any of them even. But while we were in Philippi, the guide was talking about the life of Paul. And he said God used everything in Paul's life, even before that Damascus Road experience, everything in his background prepared him for who he was.
Great statement.
And it was just like a thunderbolt from heaven. I'm not going to say it was the voice of God, but it sure sounded like it to me. Said, if you go to Dallas, people will say you went there because you grew up in the church. But just the opposite is true. I had you grow up there so that you could be pastor of the church one day. And I just came to mind everything in my life had been working for that point to bring me back home.
Our minister of music at Stonebriar Community Church, where I served for over 26 years, Don McMinn was reared in First Baptist. And he tells the sweetest story of coming down to the church on like a Saturday. He would take a bus from his home down there and would crawl in through one of the windows that would not have been closed and locked closed, and would lie down on one of the pews and would look up and just thank God for Dr. Criswell, for the church. He said it was almost like a spiritual womb that wrapped around me and warmed me. His background was pretty difficult in places, and he thought, this is the one place I felt most at home. So it's amazing, guy. Even though it is a large church, the possibility of coming and feeling a part of that can be a very personal thing.
Dr. Criswell used to call First Baptist Dallas the biggest country church in the world.
Did he really?
And there's that warmth there.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear it. And I encourage you to keep that up, because that shepherding part of the ministry is as vital as the teaching part, as you put it, the pulpit.
Yes.
But your ministry to people is where it's all important.
It really is.
And you come across them all the time in need. And as your heart reaches out to them, it's another dimension of your role as a pastor.
Well, I'm so glad God connected me to you through the years, mainly from a distance. But you have been such a mentor to me. I start every morning with Chuck Swindoll and Insight for Living while I'm on the treadmill.
Do you really?
Amy yells, "Turn it up so I can hear." So you have been such a blessing. But I'll never forget an experience that made a lasting impression upon me, and it came from your ministry. When I went to my first church in Eastland, Texas, and I'll tell about an experience there that everybody in your audience could relate to, about staying and standing firm in a place when people are trying to run you out of town. Yeah. But anyway, it was a Monday night in 1985, And I was preaching at the First Baptist Church of Breckenridge, Texas, at a pastor's conference.
Really?
And right before I was to start the evening service, an usher walked down and said, "There's an emergency phone call for you in the pastor's office. You need to take it." So I went in. It was my brother-in-law in Dallas. My mom had just had exploratory surgery. She was 54 years old. They found cancer everywhere and said she has 3 months to live. And my brother-in-law said, "Robert, you need to come to the hospital." And I said, "Well, I think she would want me to preach this sermon first." So I preached the sermon in Breckenridge. Amy and I got in the car, and we started driving through the darkness of West Texas, headed to the hospital. And I had a lot of questions for God. My mother was a tremendous Bible teacher. The day of her funeral, the Dallas Morning News did their lead editorial on her life and the impact she had made on the city of Dallas. But anyway, I just had questions. God, why would you take somebody who was such a vibrant witness for you? Tears were streaming down my face as I drove in the darkness, and I turned on the radio, and it was your voice. And you were quoting Romans 11, "Oh, the depths of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments, how unfathomable his ways."
Isn't that a great verse?
And you gave me what I needed to hear at that moment in my life.
I did not know that.
And those final 3 months, my mom listened to you every night at 9 o'clock on KCBI radio. You ministered to her till the very moment God took her home. And, you know, I've told our friends at KCBI, it's run by our church. They're a great station. And every now and then they'll have a program change and a lineup change. I said, as long as you have Chuck Swindoll in prime time, you can do whatever you want to do. And they know those are the marching orders.
Oh, my.
So thank you for the way you've impacted our family.
Thank you. Those are kind words. And I had no idea that you made that journey in the middle of that dark night and something I said touched you.
Well, thank you.
It's just thrilling to hear that. I really mean it. Let's turn a corner here and look a little deeper, excuse me, in the church, and let's talk about those tough moments when you're not everybody's favorite, and you're going through a segment of time where you feel there's very little you can say that will turn their hearts in another direction. I think about Abraham, who dealt with Lot. I think about Nehemiah with Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, the thorns in his flesh, and Alexander the coppersmith, who was difficult for Paul. Even beyond his death, he said to Timothy, "Watch out for him. He'll bring harm to you like he did to me." And even John, who loved the church so deeply, had Diotrephes he had to handle in one occasion. So obviously, in your years of experience, you've had a few that have been difficult.
You know, Chuck, I don't know about you, but I feel like everybody has a turning point in their ministry, a moment that defines who they are and prepares them for the future. And mine came early in life, but I hope those listening, especially pastors, will be encouraged by this story. I'd left First Baptist Dallas after being there as the youth minister, and I went to my first church to pastor. And Amy and I were so excited about having that first congregation we were responsible for. And we got to this little town, Eastland, Texas, out in West Texas, county seat town, 5,200 people. And it was a wonderful church. But there was a little group of men who had run the church for years and years. And they thought, with a 29-year-old pastor, we'll keep running the church. And when they found out that wasn't going to be the case, they started to churn and cause trouble and push back. And it was during those first months that my mom got her diagnosis of cancer. So on Saturdays, I was going back to Dallas to visit with her and so forth. And I'll never forget the day after my mom's funeral, these men who had been the ringleaders of the opposition, they came into my office the day after my mother's funeral, and they said, "You know, you've been getting a lot of sympathy from the people because of your mother. But now that she's dead, we're going to get rid of you."
Are you serious?
And
we're going to get rid of you?
And they started to make that happen. And it churned and churned.
Oh, man.
You know how that goes.
Oh, I do know.
You know. Yeah. And so we had our monthly business meeting scheduled. We lived in the parsonage right next to the church. And I just had a feeling that night something was going to happen in the business meeting. So I knelt down by my chair in my study and I said, Lord, I'm giving my ministry to you. Yeah. If you want me to stay, I'll stay. If you want me to leave, I'll leave. I'm giving it to you, but whichever it is, leaving or staying, I need a sign, and I need it tonight. Chuck, I was from Dallas Seminary, a student, a graduate. I knew you weren't supposed to pray for signs, but that's the best I could do at the time. You know, sometimes
you do what you got to do,
you
man.
Do what you.
Yeah.
So I prayed for a sign, and I'm telling you, the weight of the world was lifted off my shoulder when I gave my ministry to God. I walked across the alley into the fellowship hall door, walked in there. We might normally have 50 to 60 people at a business meeting. There were 250 people packed in there, standing room only. So I go through the agenda and I get to the final thing. Is there any other business? Does anybody have any other business? And immediately the ringleader of the opposition stood up and pulled a sheaf of papers out of his pocket. He said, whereas the pastor of this church has, and he listed the accusations. I didn't know if they were going to accuse me of adultery, theft, or murder or what. But
right
it was
in
Mickey Mouse.
Yeah,
in front of everybody. Yep. It was Mickey Mouse stuff. But he went through, he said, therefore I move that we vacate the office of pastor tonight. Another one stood up and said, that's right. We've been living under this dictator for months, and we're not going to put it up with it anymore. Another one spoke. Another one spoke. Everybody in the congregation just had their heads bowed. And finally I said, does anybody have anything they want to say before we take the vote? And this older woman at the back of the church, Ms. Osborne, she was a tough old woman. She was a librarian. She started walking down the center aisle, walking toward me. I didn't know if she was going to slug me or what she was going to do. She came right in front of me. I said, Ms. Osborne, do you have something you want to say? She said, nope. I just want to stand by my pastor. And she planted herself at my right hand. Then another one stood up and came down and walked and stood on the left-hand side of me. And one by one, in silence, the people started standing up and coming down to stand next to me. And finally, when there was no room left, an older man stood up and said, I don't know what this is all about, but I know I go to the coffee shop every morning and I hear men testify they were won to Christ by Brother Robert. And so I'm going to stick with him. Another one, the Nita Road, stood up and said, I've been in this church 40 years and we've run off every preacher we've ever had, but we're not going to run off this one.
Just spontaneous.
Just spontaneous. It went on for about 30 minutes. And finally, the man who made the motion stood up and said, I never realized how out of step I was with the thinking of this church. You'll never hear another word from me. And within a couple of weeks, those three families left the church, and the church grew and exploded.
It's amazing what happens when that group, that element is removed, and you're able to move ahead.
And I learned two lessons. First of all, if I had left prematurely, I would have missed the blessing. Yes. It was about during that time somebody gave me a cassette tape of Charles Stanley relating his experience at First Baptist Atlanta.
Yes.
Very similar.
I've heard that.
And he talked about a group of men that tried to buy him off and then threatened to fire him. And he said to them, I'm not going to resign like you want me to, because if I resign, I have to answer to God for leaving my post. But if you fire me, you have to answer to God. I'd rather you answer to God than me have to answer to God. And that so encouraged me. But I would have missed what God was going to do. Yes. But the other thing I learned was you really can give your ministry to God. He is going to take care of you if you give it to Him.
He will.
And I would just say to those pastors, church leaders listening to this podcast, no matter how difficult it gets, don't give up and don't miss the blessing.
Sounds like the word to me from Richard Sumi, who was a chaplain at Dallas Seminary in his final years. He was on dialysis and every word counted, and I went to him at a particular time saying, I don't want to be a church hopper. I don't want to move after 2 years here, 4 years there, 4 years here. And I'd been invited to consider Fullerton, California. And I was troubled by the fact that I hadn't been a long time in any of the previous churches. And he looked at me and he said, I have a simple answer for you. If God leads you to this new church, and if you feel certain that's his will, when you go there, stay there. Just like that. Stay there. When he did that, the little shunt in his wrist that was a part of the dialysis plan for his life, he said, oh, and by the way, that's my lifeline. That tells me the blood is still flowing. As long as blood is flowing in your life, you stay at that. I mean, it was like the voice of God. Yeah. And same thing you're saying. Don't walk away because there are a few in there trying to intimidate or take charge. And as you get a little older, you get a little better at doing this. But when you're young, it can do a number on you.
It can. It really can.
Yeah, when we both had people like that.
I've often wondered, Chuck, did you have a moment that in either you had 3 congregations before you came to Stonebriar?
Yeah, I was with Dwight Pentecost as an assistant to begin with, 4.5 years.
Well, did you ever have a time you were tempted to give up and leave?
Oh, yeah. I had one at Stonebriar, the church I had founded. And early on, we had several individuals who were elders in the church. My appointments, and I made a mistake. I acted too quickly. In a moment, I'm going to ask you about lessons learned as a result of living as you have in the ministry all these years. But I chose them quickly because I thought we needed a larger group, and they were strong in business, and they were well known in the community. And before I knew it, I was surrounded by about 4 or 5 that were really marching to a different drum beat, shall we say. And Robert, I've seldom talked about this publicly, but it got so heated that one night I'm in bed with Cynthia, and I sit up in the bed and I say, I wasn't dreaming. I've been thinking about it and perspiring, and I said, I'm going to quit next Sunday. That's it for me. I can't say. She said, what'd you say? Lie back down, Cynthia said. She put her hand on my chest and lie back down. You're not going around. I said, I'm going to quit next Sunday. She said, you are not going to quit. Remember Dr. Sumi's words?
Yes.
Stay there.
Yes.
You stay there. That was at a different church, one I'd founded. She said, we're going to ride this out. We're going to see God work, and your best years are in front of you. So from one who loves you more than anybody else, take this word from God. You are not going to leave this ministry.
Wow.
I have Cynthia to thank for staying there. Wow. The good part was that our congregation knew very little of the difficulty of what happened behind the scenes. But I'll tell you, it was like going to hell and back dealing with all of this. And finally, there was a meeting where ultimately all of them walked out.
Good. And I bet the church grew after that.
I cannot tell you the relief. It was like a 50-pound pack dropping off my back. And I thought, Lord, thank you. Thank you for giving Cynthia the strength. Because she's not the type to say something like that, but more when she sensed I was listening to the wrong voice, the adversary was coming in, she was going to say, we're not going anywhere. God has just begun to do his work here. As a result of that, we built a new sanctuary, and we began to fill that sanctuary with God's people, and the joy that followed has even caused me to virtually forget what the pain was like.
That's wonderful.
There. As you look back...
You're a great illustration, by the way, of what Dr. Criswell used to say. He said the best way to deal with your enemies is to outlive them.
He's right.
And you're doing that.
And he did that. Yeah, that's right. You are too. As you look back, what does the older Robert Jeffress say to the younger Robert Jeffress as he's getting out of seminary and has stars in his eyes and hopes that are just huge. What would you say are some of the major lessons you've gleaned over the years of ministry? And how many years?
Gee, 54.
Some odd years.
Yeah.
Okay, what are some of those vital lessons you would pass on to a friend or maybe someone you've never met that's going through a tough time? What would you say?
I would say, number one, avoid the landmines of ministry. Chuck, in 1982, I went with Dr. Howard Hendricks, our mentor and friend, to a Bible conference in Multnomah, and you were speaking at that conference.
Yeah.
And there was a Saturday afternoon, and I slipped into your conference. It was avoiding the landmines of ministry. I cannot remember to this date one scripture or story you told, but I remember the outline, and I've used it often. The 4 things that will destroy any ministry: silver, talking about money; sex; sloth; and self. Yeah. And those are landmines that are just as potent today as they were when you preached that.
So you would warn individuals moving into ministry, guard against
those 4 things.
Yeah, they are very real.
They're real. And that we have an adversary who wants to trip us up any way he can.
He does.
Second thing I would say is organize your life according to your priorities. Determine what your priorities are and organize your calendar accordingly. I tell this story, you've probably read it many times. Stephen Covey, he was talking about a time management expert that had a big open-mouthed jar, and he pulled it out. It was empty before the class. Then he took a pail of rocks and poured the rocks into that jar until it was full. And he said to the class, "How many of you would say this jar is now full?" Everybody said, "It's full, it's full." He said, "Let me show you why you're wrong." And then picks up another bucket of sand and pours it in, and the sand goes down in between the cracks and crevices. He said, "How many of you would say it's full now?" They all say, "Let me show you why you're wrong." And then he took a container of water and poured it in. He said, "Now what am the lesson I'm teaching you about time management?" And some guy said, "You're teaching us no matter how full your schedule is, you can always jam something else in there." He said, "No." He said, "The lesson is if I hadn't put the big rocks in first, I never would have gotten them in last. Put the big rocks in first."
I've not heard that story.
Every one of us has to determine what our big rocks are, especially in ministry. And something I do that has helped me so much is to take an 8.5, 11 piece of paper on Friday afternoons, and looking at the next week, I put Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday through Sunday. I divide each day into 3 parts, morning, afternoon, and evening. And I first of all put on my schedule the things I have to do that I don't have any choice, or deacon's meeting, grandchild's soccer game, whatever those appointments are.
Yes.
But then I find the place to put my big rocks in, the priorities. And sermon preparations at the top of the list, but I've got to make time for that. Maybe it's meeting with the staff. I find time for doing that, but I put the big rocks in first. And then when somebody asks me, "Can you do and such, go speak to the women's auxiliary at 10 a.m.? Oh, I would love to, but I've already got a commitment that morning. Well, it's my big rock. We've got to determine what the big rocks are, because if we don't put them in first, we'll never get them in.
And those are our determinations.
Right.
No one else can give them to us.
No, somebody has an idea of what your big rock should be. But anyway, so I would say avoid the landmines of ministry, determine what your priorities are. And number 3, and I got this with Dr. Criswell, in ministry, be sure the women like you. Now, that's going to sound funny to people. Bob Beal once told me, he talked to Dr. Criswell, he said, "What's the secret to success in the church?" He said, "Son, make sure the women like you. If the women like you, you'll be okay." And, you know, I've thought about that and seen that, Chuck. We have a theology, and I believe it's biblical, that says only men can be pastors in the church. Only men are to be the spiritual leaders. But it seems chauvinistic, and it turns a lot of women off. And I think we have to work overtime to make sure women feel like they are fellow heirs to the grace of God.
Yes.
We started something at First Baptist Dallas a year ago. We don't ordain women to be pastors. That's not biblical. But we commission women who are called to ministry, and
Yes.
we make a big thing about it,
Yes.
and we have a service, and we lay hands and pray for whatever biblical ministry God's given them. So I would just say to men out there, be sure, of course, there's some dangers to this. You can't get too close to the women, but you need to make them feel honored in the church because as the women go, so the church goes.
There are usually more of them than men
Absolutely.
in the church.
Absolutely.
I think there's something in the woman's makeup that causes them to be spiritually sensitive, whereas men have to grow into that, and some have a difficult time because business is tough. The people they deal with are competitive, but there's something about that's what makes mothers so valuable in all our lives.
Yes.
There's a tenderness when she holds us close and we weep or cry out to God in her presence, and she understands. There's something about that in the role of women. That's great.
You know, Chuck, just talking about ministry and being 25 years old, I'm so grateful for Dallas Seminary, where you have served as president and chancellor, for the biblical foundation I got there. But I got the message back when I was there in the 70s that if you wanted to build a great church, just preach the word,
Yes.
and the people will flock to hear it.
Stan Toussaint used to say, preach the word, love the people.
Yeah.
Preach the word, love the people. It sounds overly simple, but that's a pretty good guideline, isn't it?
It's a beginning place.
Yeah, it is.
But I guess what I'm saying is I learned that there's more to ministry than just preaching.
Yes.
You've got to preach, but you've got to do some other things too.
Let me ask you how you became convinced of the value of expository preaching.
Well,
There's, all kind of preaching going on, and most of it is non-expository.
I asked our friend Howard Hendricks, I said, how do you explain the fact that we learn expository preaching, but very few are doing it, even the big names from the seminary?
It's a mystery, isn't it?
He said, well, I like to call it suppository preaching. And he said it doesn't work. Well, he was being funny. It does work, but I think the most important thing about preaching is that it be biblical preaching. I preach through books of the Bible. Just finished James. I appreciated your series from 1974 on James. I steal from you, but I tell everybody I'm stealing from you. That's the difference. But
all is fair in love and war and pulpit ministry.
That's right. Or as Spurgeon said, all creativity and no plagiarism makes for dull preaching.
That's right.
But,
That's great.
But I'm doing a series now, a biblical topical series on spiritual warfare.
Oh, yeah.
You can start with a topic and go to the Bible and see what it says, or you can start with the Bible and see, but the important thing is that it be biblical preaching.
Yes.
And
it helps people in the church to have their Bible, to open it up and make a habit of reading through that as you preach. And then often say the acid test of that. They go home and they sit at their kitchen table, they open that Bible, and they can go right through that passage.
Yes.
And if we were clear enough in our presentation, they can work their way through it, and it becomes food for their souls.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But, the thing I would hear people say things like, now, for every minute you spend in the pulpit, you need to have an hour of research to go behind it. I thought, well, I preach 40 minutes. So I'm going to do 40 hours on, so yeah, you've got to study for it. Chuck, if I spent 40 hours on every sermon, I'd lose my church, I'd lose my family.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that you hear in a seminary.
Yeah.
We were told, if you think you're busy now, you're going to be 4 times as busy. I couldn't have been 4 times busier than I was getting through the master's program at Dallas Seminary. I mean, it was time consuming.
Yes.
You can have so many hours in the day, and so in the ministry, those priorities you mentioned are so valuable.
Yeah.
And if you don't address those, then vital things get left out as you're picking up the pieces and the little details.
Yeah.
And it's easy to do that, isn't it?
It's easy to do it.
Yeah. How long are you going to keep doing this?
I'm going to keep going till the Lord takes me home.
Good.
Retirement's not in my...
Yeah.
Now,
No.
If God, I don't feel like God's going to bless me like He has you with 90 years of
Come
living.
on, Robert. Yeah. Let's
It's just not
stay
in
on the subject.
It's not on the genes. It's just not in the genes. But I want to make every minute count, and I'm going to be active until God calls me.
So
home.
you're not the type that lives for retirement and looks forward to the lake and the boat and the fishing every day.
I
and
hate those
hanging
things.
out.
I can't imagine doing it.
Or
Not
golf. I'd golf if the holes weren't so small, you know. Anyway, I've never been a golfer, and while I do like fishing, I've never had enough time to do those things. But I told the church when I was leaving the pulpit and the leadership there, I am not retiring. I am not retiring. I'm not going to sit in the back porch and teach a dog how to sit up or whittle a whistle out of a piece of wood. I'm going to stay engaged in people involvement as long as I draw a breath and am able to do it without drooling. And I'm staying on target with that. Insightful living is just bigger than all outdoors for me, and I just love what we do here.
Now, I
know you do that with your ministry as well.
Tell me if this is true or not. I've heard that you never talked about succession for a long period of time at Stonebriar.
Right.
That wasn't in the vocabulary.
No.
And I think that's wise because...
I was blessed with a magnificent group of elders.
Yeah.
And we cultivated them. They didn't just emerge or suddenly drop in on us. They were all men of the church, men of God, men whose hearts were drawn toward Him. They would melt when I would open the scriptures and point out truths from the Word. They loved it, sensitive to God. As a result, they were good counselors, and they would give me good advice. I would say to them, if you ever sense I'm beginning to lose it, I'm missing a step or two, or my memory is such that I'm telling the same story 3 Sundays in a row, let me know. We'll let you know. You're not there yet. You're not there yet, they would say. But when I came toward the time when my health began to fade, glaucoma was blinding one eye and taking sight from the other, they said, you're probably right. I would bring it up because I would wind up having to study in a unique way with an instrument that magnified the page, and that's pretty tedious.
Yes.
And you're looking up here to turn the page and trying to find where you're going, and you have to record your sermon and then memorize it. That's no way to continue. And I thought, I think I can be of greater service at Insightful Living as I minister to pastors that are in need of encouragement. And I'm doing that more and more. Speaking of that, I'm mentoring 2 of our grandsons.
Oh.
Maybe the best decision I've made in the last 2 or 3 years in my life.
How old were they when
They're
you started?
in their 30s. Neither is married. One will soon celebrate his 38th birthday. The other one just turned 31. Robert, I'm telling you, it is like reliving my younger years when I'm with them.
Yeah.
We are all 3 committed to confidentiality. We're all committed to the scriptures. We're all committed to each other and to our own home environment. And while they're not married, they have moms and dads, and some of them have come through tough times, and we share openly about that. We started with my book on David, then we went to another book on Ecclesiastes, and then now on Quest for Character to pull out subjects we discuss. Often I'm quiet as I listen to them as they're going back and forth with each other, and they become the best of friends as a result. And I'm going to challenge you as your grandsons and get a little older, give some thought.
How old would you say they need to be to do that?
They have to be old enough to have been hurt in life. I heard a message in Dallas Seminary when I was a first-year student. I've used the statement numerous times. When God wants to do an impossible task, He takes an impossible individual and crushes him. They need to know what it's like to be crushed. Neither one of them had a great biological father. So their mothers have gone through a divorce. And they've remarried and met wonderful husbands that have come in and met the need that was never met before. But those young men went through dreadful times with their biological fathers. I often refer to it as a secret vault we all have. And when you mentor, you open the door of that vault and you let out those things that have hurt you and wounded you and crushed you. And we respect each other's story in that. I've had my own in my life, in my childhood. And I share that with them, and their mouths drop open. They never knew that. And I've got to watch it, or my mouth would drop open as they tell their story of the experience of fear and even danger with one of them. I never knew that. And I'll tell you, they're all man. They're fully masculine, but boy, do they cry. Do we cry? There are tears shed, too deep for words. And there's something about knowing they're carrying on my blood, my legacy. They're a part of that. And I will tell them often, you guys are going to make wonderful husbands, wonderful dads. Let's name the things you've learned, and they'll start in. And Robert, we could go the whole 2.5 hours we meet as they list the things that they have learned from these times together. I'd never done this before, never done to me until I was overseas. And Bob Newkirk with the Navigators built into my life while I was a young Marine. And I had a touch of that mentoring, but it wasn't quite like we're doing it. It's every Saturday morning, 9:30 to 12 or 12:30, and they never look at their watches. It's like we can't wait for this time. And they're there. They want to know, are we going to be? Absolutely, we're going to be there. We're going to be with each other. Well, as a result, they've learned to say things like, I love you.
Oh, wow.
They don't just say, love you, which is what we say to a dog, or a neighbor. Love you. No, use the first person pronoun. I love you. They've learned what it means to dig deeply and acknowledge in all vulnerability the things they fear. One was struggling with the fear of intimacy. And he said, I don't know where that comes from. And we never judge any of us as to what we bring up. We deal with it. Rather than, man, I'm really ashamed of you for that. We don't use those words. We use words like, yeah, I've been there. I've had thoughts like that. And they want to know, how do you make it, Bubba? I'm Bubba and Cynthia's Nana. How do you make it to age 90 and never fall morally? How do you do that?
How do you do that?
You become a Daniel. You make up your mind ahead of time. You determine no matter what, I will not allow that to happen. I don't drive with another woman in the car individually, unless it's my daughter. I don't drive. I don't have dinner with another woman for an evening meal. I don't spend time in a room with another woman without the door staying open or another member of my staff with me. I don't sit on the bed when I go to the hospital to visit with them. I'm even careful about the hugging and all that goes with it, because they want to hug you, they want to kiss you, and they mean well, but the whole congregation is watching this line up front and women coming by, and what else is going on? So we're to avoid even the appearance of evil.
That's right.
So you never fall if you do that. I tell the men that. This is a guarantee, man. You avoid even the appearance of evil, You won't allow your computer to pull up those sites that will lead you into pornography. I don't even know what's shown on pornography. I've never seen it. I can't trust myself to even look to investigate it. I don't want that filth.
Yes.
I don't listen to filth. I don't run with people who curse. Mm-hmm. I don't spend time with those who live a double life. I've dealt with too many, as you've felt many as well, who have fallen and say, you know what? I remember when this began to happen, and they can mention it. Silver, sex, sloth, or self. Yeah. Martin Luther was about to go before the Pope and all the cardinals that were appearing to make sure that he would recant from his position, which he'd never planned to do. And a man walked up to him and said, Brother Martin, aren't you afraid? And he stood and looked at him and said, greater than the Pope and all his cardinals, I fear most that great Pope, self. Yeah. You know, Robert, we're in a position of being pedestalized. I mean, we can allow that. We can even promote that. So for that reason, I never had a bookstore in any church I served. I never talked about books I'd written. I never mentioned any of those things that I was producing. I would rarely even mention the ministry of Insightful Living. Those people are there to be nurtured in the things of God, not the things of Swindoll. Right. And I'm not there to sell my goods. Right. So, you know, I say that to my publishers. No, I won't promote it among our congregation. Yeah. No, I'm not going to do it. Now, it'd be mentioned on the air to the general public that a book was written. But I always kept the subject away from what I'm going to get out of it, but rather what I'm going to be able to give through it. And if you never yield in any of these areas, Robert, you can live to be 120 and never inappropriately touch a woman.
Yeah, that's right.
And people can tell when you're really walking with God.
Yes, they can.
I mean, you don't have to talk about it.
Yeah.
They can say, you know what? That guy's real. There's no phony baloney here. He's talking straight.
That's right. They know. Chuck, speaking of books, our mutual friend Celia Yates tells me that you are working on your memoirs.
I have just finished my memoirs.
Give us a sneak preview, because I have one question I'm burning up to ask you, and that is, if you could do one thing differently after 90 years of living, what would you have done differently?
I would have taken more time choosing the leaders of the church I was serving. I've made my worst mistakes by getting in a hurry. I am by nature motivated.
Yes.
My mind is quick, and I get ideas, and I want to plunge into them. I love the camaraderie of a close team of associates in ministry. Not yes men, but real men. Not no men. I don't want them either. They're all negative. Yeah. I want those who will think through what's best and tell me what's best. I want wise counsel, which may not be the direction I'm moving. And I want to be open to that. I think as we get older, we get brittle, we get more dogmatic, we get more convinced of our ways, and nothing wrong with convictions. Dr. Walford said to our graduating class at Dallas Seminary, I fear that we're graduating individuals with too many beliefs, not enough convictions. Oh. I know exactly what he means now. At that time, I didn't really know the difference. Beliefs are what you have learned and are able to pass on as information. Convictions are things you would virtually die for. You'd lay down your life for them. Those are the things you're convinced of. Mm-hmm. So Paul says to Timothy, learn from me, but become convinced of those things in your own heart. Mm-hmm. Take heed to yourself and then to your ministry. Yes. Ministry is about a person That is, from the pastor's point of view, the person himself. And then it's about the people that the Lord uses in our lives, and uses us in their lives. Without people, we have no ministry.
That's right.
And thank God for them. Whether they're difficult to deal with or whether they're among our best friends, thank God for those who are willing to listen when we speak, which is always a surprise to me, who are willing to take lessons from what we have learned, sometimes the hard way, and don't question them, but believe them. Those who trust us. I mean, think about our ministry, your ministry on the air and in television. Many of them will never meet you personally, and yet they give to your ministry.
Yes.
What a trust is that?
Yes.
Giving in absentia. Mm-hmm. And our congregations give because they're a part of that. It's all visible. But in ministry, when there's a trust,
yes,
you don't. I want to say this right. You don't automatically have respect. You earn respect.
That's right.
You earn the respect. It's gained over the years.
And you can lose it so quickly.
Oh, you can. Alexander White, one of my favorite biographers, writes in his work on the Old Testament characters, we hang very heavy weights on very thin wires.
Yeah.
One of those thin wires is our reputation. Mm-hmm. That's why you can't fudge with the opposite sex. You can't sneak around and live a silent life, hidden life, and think it's not taking a toll.
Somebody is always watching,
even
if that someone is God.
F.B. Meyer wrote, no man suddenly becomes base. No tree suddenly rots and falls. No church suddenly splits. No marriage suddenly ends in divorce. It's all got a history. And as you build toward that ultimate end of the great day we stand before our Savior, open, nothing to hide, how great it will be to know we did not exploit a congregation.
Yes.
We did not take advantage of someone. We did not use people. We loved them and appreciated them and encouraged them. Those are the things that you just learn the hard way.
You know, Chuck, I was preaching Sunday on spiritual warfare, and I came across a quote about glaciers, how a glacier can appear to stand in place for decades and then suddenly become an avalanche that destroys everything. But it doesn't happen suddenly. It's over a long period of time that there are imperceptible changes in the temperature and the shifting of weight.
Yeah.
It's the same way with us.
Yeah.
It's those slight changes in our spiritual temperature.
And it breaks away.
It breaks away and destroys everything.
Yeah, we had a man come to one of our conferences and speak, and he was a wonderful speaker and a good preacher, and we all admired him, and found out 2 weeks later he had been living a double life, and he had not one woman but several. Each one thought they were the only one, and he had this other life that was public, and it looked pure as the driven snow. But one of those wives, one of those women, each one married, husband found out about it and reported it, and it opened up a chasm. I'm telling you, Robert, that took such a toll on that church. I don't know that they'll ever recover.
Yeah.
Total disillusionment because the guy was so winsome.
Yeah.
So I've learned, as we talk about lessons, you can't beat real. You just can't beat real. Country preacher says, be who you is, because if you ain't who you is who you ain't. And if you become who you ain't, you're a phony. It won't be long. The people like us who are before the public will be found out.
Yeah. Chuck, I've got to say something while the cameras are still rolling here. I want to thank you personally for being a Paul to me for decades, by what you've written, by what you preached, and mainly by how you lived. And I think I speak for millions of people when I say thank you for being who you are.
I praise God for men who are in your position, younger, and in places of influence. Leadership is basically influence. And even when we're not aware of it, we're influencing. People are watching.
Yeah.
And they want to believe. They really do, unless they're jaded. There are always a few, but most people want you to be who you appear to be. And when that's never proven otherwise, they have a rock solid pattern to follow.
That's right.
A person that we need. We all need heroes. You have yours and I have mine.
Well, you're at the top of my list. And I hope you'll invite me back in 10 years at your 100th mark.
Absolutely.
Let's talk again.
Anybody in the work you're in deserves to be invited back because you pay the price regularly. Thank you for standing firm.
Thank you.
For not faking it. Thank you for being the husband to Amy that she needs. Thank you for being the grandfather to triplets and the dad to 2 daughters that more than you realize will quote you long after you're gone because you represent that. And we want to do that in our lives all our years.
Well, we do. It's been great to be with you, Chuck.
Thank you for being with us, Robert. We've loved having you here.
Thank you.
You're a friend of ours and a friend in ministry and a partner with us at Insight for Living. Thank you for all you mean to us.
Thank you.